everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to bring you guys my best books that I've read so far in February. So if you would recall from my last wrap-up, which was my January wrap-up, I am doing my wrap-ups differently for 2023, where I'm only going to be talking about these standout books. So if I read books that I hated or really didn't like, I'll bring up those books in these wrap-ups, and of course my favorite 5-star reads of the month. And so I still wanted to split these wrap-ups into 2 parts per month so I'm not so overwhelmed when filming these videos. So I think I have about 6 books that I want to bring up today, and I'm very excited about all of them because I don't have any bad books to bring up in today's video. So today's video should be pretty positive. Let's just go ahead and get on into it. So the first book I want to bring up is From Sand and Ash by Amy Harmon. So this is a historical fiction novel that takes place during World War II that has a very strong romantic element to it. So you could almost call this a historical romance, but I would still categorize this as historical fiction. So this was a book that came highly recommended from Tori from Novel Life. I remember she featured this in her favorites of like 2021. So she talked about this book a very long time ago. Amy Harmon is an author that has been sitting on my TBR for years at this point. I really want to get to What the Wind Knows at some point. There's a couple other books of hers that sound really amazing. But this one, I've only really heard Tori talk about it, but it just sounded so amazing because we have Angelo, our hero. He was born in the States, but he is sent to live in, I believe it's Florence is where this mainly takes place, in Italy, with some family, and he has a prosthetic leg, so there is disability representation in this. And so when he gets older, he becomes a priest. But we have our heroine, Ava, who is Jewish, and she also lives in Florence. I believe they're neighbors. It's like a childhood friends to lovers vibe going on. And so Ava and Angelo have been very close for years. And so over the years, they definitely start to have more romantic feelings for each other. But Angelo is dead set on becoming a priest, and he does eventually. And so a lot of their romance is him grappling with the fact that he loves Ava so much and he would love to be with her for the rest of his life, but he made this vow of priesthood and he loves God. He loves serving God and serving his people, you know, in his community and in his church. And so then we have this really beautiful romance set in the backdrop of World War II, and this book centers around how clergy of the Catholic Church were helping to hide Jewish refugees from the Nazis, basically. That's a huge part of this story. And so Angelo is working his ass off trying to hide as many Jews in his community as possible. And Ava, for a while, is able to pass as a non-Jew, but eventually she gets into trouble as well. So, I mean, of course, this is a very emotional story, a very heavy story, given the backdrop. But I thought that it was just so beautifully done. I loved the different discussions surrounding the differences and the similarities between the Jewish faith and the Catholic faith. I thought that it just added a lot to the story. It was just very interesting, and I loved getting to learn about a part of World War II history that I feel isn't talked about very much. I feel like we don't really hear too much about Italy except about Mussolini in general, right? But we don't really hear about how the Nazis took over Italy as well, right? And this part of history of how these clergy people were helping the Jews and all of that, I thought it was beautifully done. I love Amy Harmon's writing style. The romance in this was stunning as well. I don't think it's overshadowed by the other plot elements. I feel like everything's balanced really well, and I highly recommend it if you're in the mood for a World War II historical fiction with a strong romantic element to it, with a little bit of a taboo element because Angelo's a priest, and, you know, just learning a bit about history that isn't talked about all that often, then I would highly recommend this. So next book I want to talk about is Funny Feelings by Tara DeWitt. So I've actually read this book twice at this point. I read this towards the end of January, And when I was reading that book, I was primarily listening to it on audio just because of what was going on in my life at the time. I was very busy, so I really only had time to listen to the audio when I was driving to and from work, doing things around the house, things like that. And every now and then, there comes a book in my life that I really just need to sit down and read either the ebook or the physical copy. Now, my method of reading, my preferred method, is that I listen to the audio version while also being able to follow along with a physical or an ebook copy. Now, most of the time when I'm just listening to an audiobook, my reading experience is fine. I don't really have any issues with really retaining the story or really taking it in. But for some reason with this book, I found that I was missing details, not necessarily zoning out. I think that I just wasn't able to fully digest what I was reading. And so this past week or so, I decided to just go ahead and reread it because the audiobook's readily available to me. It's on Hoopla if you have that service. And the ebook is on Kindle Unlimited. So it's just very easy for me to access this book. So this is a wonderful friends to lovers contemporary romance where we are centering around our heroine, Farley, who is a stand-up comedian. And so for that reason alone, like the glimpses that we got into her stand-up routines and coming up with routines and different things like that, it definitely gave me vibes of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which is a show that I'm currently watching right now. I'm in the middle of season 2 and I'm really, really enjoying it. So I loved the stand-up element to this because stand-up to me is a job that I would never ever want to do. I think that it's a very hard skill and craft to develop. And even though I am a performer, I'm an actor and a singer, that's doing scripted things, right? that other people have come up with, right? Whereas with stand-up, you're coming up with your own script as well as, you know, putting some improv elements into your routines and things like that. And I just feel like it's hard to be that funny in that kind of setting, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, I just admire people who do that. And so I loved following Farley, and then Meyer, our hero, was a stand-up comedian, but right when he started getting really famous, he stopped, mainly because he had a one-night stand with this woman. She got pregnant with their daughter, Hazel, and so he became a father. And unfortunately, the woman, the mother of Hazel, she ended up passing away in childbirth, and so he had to raise Hazel pretty much on his own. And so now in present day, we're seeing that Meyer is Farley's manager. And this also has a fake dating element. There's a lot of tropes in this that I really love because we've got Meyer, who's a single dad. We've got friends to lovers. We've got like the workplace vibe, given that he's her manager. They've been pining for each other for years. And I love the relationship too that Farley has with Hazel. So Hazel is deaf, and Meyer had to learn ASL, you know, raising her, and Hazel learned, not Hazel, Farley learned ASL from a young age as well. So that was like one thing that they bonded over. And I just love this little like found family unit that the three of them created over the years. This is told a lot in time jumps. So you see when Farley, Meyer, and Hazel first meet, and then it kind of jumps back and forth between that time and then the present when Farley and Meyer are now fake dating. And this was just wonderful. It was funny. It gave me all the wonderful feelings that I get from friends to lovers romances. I just thought that it was beautifully done. And I don't think that I absolutely needed to reread this. I actually retained a lot from the first time that I read the book. But I did pick up little details here and there. And yeah, I just highly recommend this. I think it's just a wonderful contemporary romance. And I'm definitely looking forward to checking out more from Tara DeWitt at some point. So the first couple of novellas that I want to talk about that I read during Novellathon, by the way, I did do a weekly reading vlog where I talked about all of the novellas that I read in depth, so I will have that linked up in the cards above if you want to check out that vlog. But if you just want to get the bullet points about my favorite novellas, then keep on watching. So yeah, the first author I want to talk about is Kimberly Lemming. I read 3 novellas by her this week. I am obsessed with Kimberly Lemming. She does not have an extensive backlist. I believe she has, what, like 4 or 5 novellas total. 4 of them are a part of her Mead Mishap series, which is a fantasy rom-com series. And then she has a standalone little short novella that I also read this week that I'll get to in a second. But I did read Missile Foe, which is book like 1.5 in her Mead Mishaps series. So you would read this after book 1, which is that time I got drunk and saved a demon. So this is a fake mating romance between Luca, who is a fox shifter, and we have Ruby, who is a human. And so basically Ruby's father has a curse put on him because he stole ore from Luca's land. So Ruby's father and Ruby, they're both blacksmiths. And so Luca put a curse on her father that any weapon he makes now has the ability to speak, but all of these weapons only talk about very crass and vulgar sexual things. I'll leave it at that. And so obviously that's going to drive both Ruby and her father crazy. And so she decides to make this little gift basket, you know, make a little offering to what is known as like a fox demon to her. She doesn't know who Luca really is or what kind of being he really is. And so yeah, she goes into the woods and Luca shows up. And they end up making this deal that Luca will release her father from that curse if she agrees to be his fake mate, because he is about to go on a little journey to the local like dragon lord of their land. So Luca's trying to get this local dragon lord to formally acknowledge that the lands that Luca lives on are his. He owns those lands, right? And so in order to look more legitimate to this dragon lord, he wants to be able to bring a mate with him. And so yeah, they make this fake mating deal. And just like with every other novella in the series, this is absolutely hilarious. This is the novella where we get introduced to Alexis, who is a talking sword. And she is crass, she is vulgar, she's freaking hilarious. I can't tell you how many times I was dying laughing out loud at the things that Alexis would say. She is a menace to society, she is an icon, and I love her so much. Like seriously, if someone were to ask me to put together a list of fictional characters that I could have dinner with, like Alexis would be at the top of that list. That's how much I love this talking sword. And so she ends up being Ruby's companion throughout this novella, and then from then on in the series, Alexis plays a pretty active role, which is just amazing. But yeah, this is just the perfect balance of hilarious and sexy, because Luca, the hero, he can get it, okay? And they also just have kind of a sweet and tender romance going on as well. So this was just like the perfect little novella. It's just about 60 pages. I couldn't help but give it 5 stars. The other novella by Kimberly Lemming that I gave 5 stars is called 2 Scoops of Hellfire. This is totally unrelated to the Mead Mishaps series. So if you just wanted to read a little something by Kimberly Lemming to get a sense of her writing style, then this would be what I would recommend. So this is about our heroine who, she picks up baking during COVID lockdown in 2020, and she accidentally summons this warrior demon while baking cupcakes. So we have Kane, our hero, who is the warrior demon. And upon meeting our heroine, he's just like immediately obsessed with her, and fun, sexy times ensue between the two of them very quickly, because like I said, this is a short novella. It's like 30 pages, okay? So they got to get to it fast. And it was just so much fun, sexy, just an awesome time, you know? So again, I couldn't help but give this 5 stars. It was just another home run from Kimberly Lemming. Next up, we have Hold by Claire Kent. Oh my God. Claire Kent is one of those authors that every time I pick up one of her books, I'm always surprised by how invested I get and how much I love them. And at this point, I shouldn't be surprised because I've now read 3 books by her, but somehow I always am. So this is book 1 in a survival space dystopian romance series where each novella takes place on a different planet, and each novella kind of centers around this police force known as the Coalition that controls all of space. And so if you do anything wrong, like any little thing wrong, they will drop you on some kind of either prison planet or some kind of just like crazy planet where survival is just like absolutely insane. And so this first one is about Rihanna, who is an archaeologist, and she, you know, you have to get permission to do digs anywhere from the coalition. And so she got permission to do a dig at this, like, I don't know, I want to say like temple ruins or palace ruins or something, but she didn't realize that that permission only went for the actual like palace itself, not the grounds surrounding it. And so she's doing her dig, doing her thing, and she gets caught. And so she gets dropped onto this prison planet that is entirely made up of water that is poisonous to humans. And so there is a prison that is built underneath the ocean, underneath the planet. And so it's this crazy prison where all of the prisoners, and they're all humans, they're all kept in just one big space together. There are a few cells that have like working, you know, metal doors, but most of the people don't have access to that, and so everybody's just together. So as you can imagine, it's a very terrifying, awful place, you know. And so the commanding officer that is dropping her off into this prison is like, hey, you need to find the strongest man here so that he can protect you, because that's going to be your only hope of survival. And so she's like, oh shit, I need to take that warning seriously. And so when she first gets dropped off, there's a few men that approach her that basically want her to be their sex slave. But she makes eye contact with this man who's just like on his own, but he has his own cell with a working metal door, and he has his own bathroom. And she's strangely enough attracted to him. And so they make eye contact. And so he takes her in, and she is absolutely willing and able to basically trade her body for his protection. That's how their relationship starts. So in that way, I guess you could say this is dubious consent, but like she knows what she's getting into, you know, she's willing to do whatever it takes to be protected and to survive. And so it's their romance. His name is Kane. So it's Rihanna and Kane. And Claire Kent is the master at writing these like grumpy stoic heroes who mainly speak through their actions, you know. And all of her books are only, as far as I've read, they're only from the heroine's POV, so you don't get a glimpse into the hero's psyche or anything until the end, when he like finally confesses his true feelings to the heroine. And because these heroes don't use a lot of words, when they do, it means that so much more, right? And I cried while reading this. Oh my god, like, Kane has my heart and soul. I just loved their romance, their connection, this crazy dire situation that they're both in. They're both trying to survive and maybe try to escape. You know, there's just a lot happening. And then this is like a 5-hour audiobook, so it's a pretty short novella, but you get the full story that you need from this novella. I absolutely loved it, absolutely obsessed. Last but not least, we have one of my like top 5 favorite historical romances at this point, okay? So I finally read The Duke Gets Even by Joanna Shupe. We just recently had our live show discussion for the Blushing Blue Stocking Society, which is a historical romance book club that I run with my really great friend Lisa from Remarkably Lisa. So I'm gonna link that live show down in the description below if you want to know all of my in-depth thoughts, and I mean all of them, because I went into every little thing that I loved about this book in that live show. So just go watch that if you want to know more. But this is book 4 of Joanna Shupe's Fifth Avenue Rebel series, which is a Gilded Age romance series. And I was very, very excited going into this book because we were finally getting the Duke of Lockwood and Nellie's romance. This is a romance that had been built up since the first book of the series, and I was very excited. But for those of you that don't know, I absolutely adore The Lady Gets Lucky, which is book 2 of this series. It's the one with the lavender cover, but it has a very similar clinch cover vibe to this one. And I will never shut up about how that's one of my like top 3 favorite historical romances of all time. Like, I just love that book. And so going into this one, I knew it wasn't gonna measure up, but I was still very excited because of Nellie and Lockwood. And upon further reflection, I actually love this more than The Lady Gets Lucky. So that should tell you guys a lot. If I were to give books 6 stars, this would be a 6-star read. That's how amazing this was. And I think what stands out so much more about this book versus The Lady Gets Lucky is that I liked Alice, the heroine of that book, but Kit, the hero, was the star of the show. Whereas in this book, Nellie and Lockwood are equally amazing characters. Just their personalities in general, but also their character developments as well, their character arcs. I love what Joanna Shupe did with their characters individually and as a couple. It's absolutely amazing. But to give you a very basic premise, there's a lot going on with their romance. But basically, Nellie is known as like a scandalous woman in society, especially because she's unmarried. You know, society definitely looks down on her for doing whatever the hell she wants, basically. And then we have Lockwood, our hero, who is a duke, but he's in a lot of debt. And so back then, the only real answer to get some funds back in the coffers was to marry a rich heiress. And so that's what he does. He goes to the States to, you know, meet and marry an American heiress. And so Lockwood, poor Lockwood, he's been through a lot because he got engaged to two of the other heroines in the series, and then one of the heroines, they were kind of like fake courting to make her hero jealous. So he's been through a lot. Oh my god, Nellie and Lockwood's first meeting, guys, oh my god, it's everything. So there's a lot of scenes in this book that take place in water, mainly because Lockwood swims a lot. He has heart problems, and so that's the best way that he can keep his heart healthy, is to do a lot of rigorous exercise. So he swims a lot. And so Nellie and Lockwood first meet when they're both just swimming in the ocean. They're at this house party in Newport, Rhode Island. And so Lockwood's just swimming, but he sees this beautiful, you know, red-haired woman that at first he thinks she's a mermaid. And Nellie kind of starts like making out with him a bit because she thinks that Lockwood is this other man she was supposed to meet, and so she realizes that he's somebody completely different, but they immediately have this like chemistry with each other. But the next day, Nellie realizes that Lockwood is courting her best friend, and so that starts this sort of hate to love dynamic between the two of them. Like, Nellie really does get to a point where she hates Lockwood, but they also can't deny their chemistry, and so they do start an affair. Things go on from there, and I am just obsessed with everything that Joanna Shupe did with their romance. She gave us everything that we needed, not only from their story, but also from the finale of this series as a whole. I really loved how she wrapped up everything. I loved the side characters, the plot, the steam. Every time I think Joanna Shupe can't get better and better at writing steamy scenes, she always surprises me. Like, this was almost sexier than The Bride Goes Rogue, which is really saying something because that book is hot. Like, she goes there with the steam. I do think you should read this series in order. I just feel like this book isn't going to mean as much if you don't start at least with book 2, which is The Lady Gets Lucky. A lot of people have mixed reviews about The Heiress Hunt, which is book 1, so you don't need to read that book. You can start with book 2, then go into The Bride Goes Rogue, and then go into The Duke Gets Even. Oh man, this was just so amazing. Okay, so that is going to be it for my mid-February wrap up. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, maybe got some recommendations from me. I would also love it if you would leave a comment down below if you want to tell me about some books that you've been reading so far in February that you've really been loving, because I love getting recommendations from you guys. I would also love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you so much in advance if you do, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!